What's up, guys? Welcome back to Storytime with Uncle John, where we read stories from Reddit and around the web. Today's stories are from the subreddit r/malicious compliance. So anyway, spent the better part of yesterday working on trim and stuff for the upstairs hallway. Finally passed the drywall phase, thank God. Still got to do a little bit of sanding, but I figured I'd go ahead and slam the trim up. People can sand around the trim for the most part. It's square edge trim, so it'll be alright. Anyway, that's why this video is going to be very late today. Alright, let's get to the stories. Boss ignores my background and learns F around and find out lesson all idiots do. I worked as care staff for a private company of 250-ish employees that deals with special needs individuals, mental disabilities, and often physical ones. We had day hab facilities. Day rehabilitation? I don't know. And group homes. In a prior job, I did the same for the state, but was moved to an IT role after a while until the stupid from upper management became too great. That's a whole other story. Before any of that, I was an EMT, and before that, I was in the Army and know how to cover my own butt. Okay, that's the end of the backstory. My boss sent out an email to all staff and had an in-person company meeting because I put on a form the state inspectors look at that said, client returned from day trips sunburned, disoriented, and dehydrated. Staff with the client reported they passed out. Apparent heat exhaustion. Reported to RN and state authority for possible neglect. Apparently the RN never looked at the report before the state auditors came in a week later, although she did look at the client and agree with me about the heat exhaustion the next day when she was back in the office from the day off. Fast forward 9 days, we have an emergency company meeting. Boss hands out a paper specifically telling every staff they are not to do anything outside the scope of their job description, and they're not doctors, while staring at me the whole time. She calls me out specifically during the meeting by name. Alright, fine. I stopped doing anything but the exact wording of my original hiring duties. 2 months pass. One day I get a call about a problem with the computers at the main office in San Antonio. My job is over an hour away. I had traditionally done all the IT troubleshooting, as I was one of the first hires of the company, and I had a background for it. Boss calls me on my day off and asks me to drive to the main office and fix their computer system. I said to her, I can't do anything outside of my listed duties, per your order. Then I hang up and turn the phone off until dinner. After I turn the phone back on, I get a call within 10 minutes from the company owner. He, who had been nothing but nice to me up until now, just bluntly asks, when I felt like doing my job and getting things working, but especially payroll, don't I want to get paid tomorrow? Get your ass in gear, son. That may have indeed been the wrong way to start the conversation with someone who wasn't being paid extra for their IT problems. I referred him to the email and in-person letter boss had put out, then I pointed out how company policy had a no firearms rule, but he specifically always carried a 1911 to all company meetings and events on his right hip, calling it out by model as a Kimber 4. I then politely advised him to find a way to deal with his own problems as the computers being bricked wasn't one of mine, but paying employees such as me was one of his, per state and federal law. Then I hung up. I turned my phone off again until I was at work 2 days later. In that time, apparently 3 staff had quit from failing to be paid, 18 more were threatening to, and the owner had driven over to have a chat with boss and myself. They laid out that as a senior care staff, my job role had expanded over the years I was there, 5 at that point, and I countered that the pay hadn't at all since I had been hired. My doing IT work was a charity from me, not a job requirement, and I appreciated none of the disrespect I had gotten lately from either of them. I also pointed out that I knew full well that a contract IT company would cost them at least hundreds, if not thousands, for a consult, and at least $200 an hour, and if I deigned to fix the problem, it would take about 3 hours. Owner offered me a 50-cent raise and 3 hours overtime. I countered with a public apology in front of all staff from boss, a $3 an hour raise, and an exemption from the no-carry firearm policy he was being hypocritical about. They said no, so I said I'll be in the back with the clients doing my job duties and to let me know when they contacted an IT company and changed their minds. Keep in mind that all the computer systems were effectively bricked at this point, so the nurses can't do any charting. No one can bill time for casework. The state paperwork, while largely paper, can't be sent. It took them 4 days. Who knows how many calls to computer specialists for quotes and another 8 quitting employees to agree to my conditions. After 4 tries to get me to let go of the concealed carry one. That was their sticking point. I don't carry a gun at work and never have, even though in my state it's totally legal. But it bugged me the absolute hypocrisy of the owner, so I would have given up the raise before that. In the end, it turns out that the owner's wife deleted something she shouldn't have had access to, and it took all of 8 minutes to restore them from backups. I personally had an old hard drive I wasn't using that the company said were an unnecessary cost. If the owner of the company is going to carry his Kimber on his right hip to all meetings and whenever he's out and about representing the company, yet your employees can't? Yeah, that's kind of stupid. I'd love to be able to do that if I lived in a state that was legal to do so. As it is, it's tough enough in this state to get a concealed carry. Not that I feel I need it most of the time. It's just like anything else. It's like having a fire extinguisher. You just never know. As for the other conditions that OP put on them, totally reasonable. I mean, who doesn't get at least some kind of raise yearly after your first year? Or some kind of raise within 5 years? Also, what employee in their right mind sits there stagnant, or not stagnant, they were having you do extra duties and not take extra pay? I could let it go for a little while, but come on. You want to keep piling responsibilities on me, but you don't want to give me any extra pay? I mean, what would it cost you to hire somebody to do this? Not just an outside firm. If you hired another employee just to sit there and do my original duties while I took over tech, what would all that cost you, So, yeah, it's just a bad look for the company all the way around, especially the neglect in the beginning. Asked me to put the gas back in the car once I'm done using it, but never do it in return? Okay. Maybe it's malicious compliance, maybe it isn't. I'll let you guys decide. Our roommate, male 24, my husband, male 30, and I, non-binary 23, share a vehicle. Roommate and I both DoorDash just to fill the gaps our regular pay can't get, and one of the things we talked about when we first had a roommate move in was whenever any of us use the car, we will replace the gas used. My husband and I always leave together to DoorDash, and every time we have always filled the tank back up to full, and that's where it's at when we start dashing. Recently, we noticed every time, except once, that the roommate goes door dashing, he doesn't replace the gas, leaving it to my husband and I to do it. Even if he doesn't go door dashing, he still expects us to fill the car up again to full before we door dash. Not to mention we're constantly expected to pay for everyone's food, including the roommates, all the time when we go out to eat. We had that talk of, if we go out to eat, please try to keep it under X amount per person. Not that it's a huge deal of paying for everyone's food, but we're living paycheck to paycheck as it is, so it adds up sometimes. We DoorDash to make sure we can afford all the bills accordingly. My husband had to mention to the roommate that, hey, we have some bills to still pay off this week, and we're not able to afford all three of us to pay on one bill for dinner. So would you mind paying for what you get this time and maybe put the gas you used back in the car? The roommate paid for the food, but refused to pay for the gas. My husband and I went door dashing with the same amount of gas he left it in when he got home from dashing the other night. Now I call myself petty for it, but I refused to refill the tank all the way back up again this time. Then, when we got done door dashing, I stopped at the gas station and put exactly what we used in gas back into the car. The roommate goes door dashing again tomorrow. As far as he knows, the tank is full like always. I feel like he's going to be in for a surprise when he sees it's not. Now don't get me wrong, it's his vehicle, financed and in his name, and I get I may not have much room to complain, but we've put more money into this car than he has on our dime, and didn't ask for any repayment. It just seems like maybe putting in a little bit of gas that he used isn't too much to ask for when he expects us to fill the car up each time we get done using it. Edit to add, since it's repeatedly coming up. I pay for the maintenance on the car, oil changes, car washes, wipers, additional fluids needed, etc. I'm paying for the parts if anything goes wrong because he only gets paid once a month, aside from DoorDash, whereas I get paid weekly. Edit 2, since people aren't reading comments fully, my husband and I have been looking for a vehicle. We've been struggling to find one that's decent enough and within a price range we can afford while also affording all our other bills. Most of the vehicles that we can afford turn out to be completely junk and not able to move safely, like the frame's cracked or rusting or bent in a way that is ticking time bomb as to when it'll break, or there are other issues that are unsafe. So it's not like we haven't been trying to find a vehicle of our own. That said, the reason I mentioned the weekly monthly pay is because I make $2,600 a month, whereas he makes around $780 a month. So there's a definite difference. We're also splitting the car insurance and loan costs. Alright, I don't know if I'm confused, but I got a couple questions here. Probably more questions than answers, but if I own a car and I'm allowing somebody else to use it, then they should be putting a little extra in. Should they be paying for all the maintenance and all the fuel? No. And honestly, filling the tank up is kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it's kind of like a rental fee. If I use somebody else's car and I start out and the car's at half a tank when I, get in it to go, I make sure that it's above half a tank, probably 3/4, close to that, if I put it back. Most of the time I'll fill it up, but it just depends on, maybe I'm strapped that week or something. But there's always going to be extra. As far as paying for maintenance, that probably should have been a shared cost if you guys were equally using the car. It is his car. I'm not sure what the rent situation's like, But if you're not paying rent to live, I mean, I don't know, is it in your name? Is it in his name? Like, whose place is this? Who's on the lease? You kind of got to pay equal costs for that. As far as the meals go, he should be paying for his own meal, unless you're not paying rent and it's his apartment or flat or whatever, in which case you should be paying a little something extra. But that gets convoluted after a while doing trades for things. So I don't know. I think there should be, extra gas in the car for your fee, plus maybe a percentage of the maintenance costs, and then rent. And he can buy his own dinner out of the rent that you pay him, if that makes sense. But yeah, it gets a little convoluted when you start trading things off, and yeah, it's hard for people to keep track of, and everybody thinks they're always getting screwed over. As far as the unsafe car thing, I get it that you're looking for safety and everything else. You make a ton more than he does. You should be able to afford something. You don't need a car with payments. You go find a car that's like, $1,500, $2,000, whatever, and most of those are going to be safe. They may not be super reliable, but they're going to be safe. I've been driving $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 cars my entire life. Actually, that's the modern day equivalent. Back in the day, I would have bought one for $300 to $500 and make it work. I get to my carpentry job or whatever job I have, and I've even done some delivery jobs on, $300 to $500 cars. So it is doable. With that being said, some of that has to do with the inspection laws in your state. Where I live, it's a one-time inspection, and they inspect everything. All factory equipment has to be there and operational and everything else. So once you get past that hump, so you may spend an extra on a junk-ish car, you may spend an extra $500 to $1,000. So turning that $1,500 car into a $2,500 to $3,000 car, which is still inexpensive. And I've had those cars last a long time. So, maybe it's time. Just jump in and get something going. Anyway, off my soapbox now. Car keys and dogs. So this is a story about me trying to hand my mom her car keys and how my dogs tried to run out of the apartment door. So one day my mom needed to go to the store and she forgot her car key fob. She asked me to open the door and hand it to her. I was reluctant to open the apartment door because our dogs have a tendency to run out the door when you open it. So my solution was to go into my mom's room, close her door, and open the door that leads to the hall that's in her room. So I tried to open up the hall door in my mom's room, and she said not to open it. I said that's what would be easier because the dogs won't go wild. I didn't really want to deal with the dogs trying to get out the apartment door, because when they do, sometimes they like to climb the stairs of the hall and run amok. My mom was adamant about opening the main apartment door, not wanting to fight her. I was like, oh, okay. So I proceed to open the main apartment door to hand her the key fob. Lo and behold, as soon as I open the door, the dogs start trying to run out the apartment door. My mom and I eventually get the dogs back into the apartment. After we get them in, I said to her that I told her that would happen. She begrudgingly agreed. That's pretty mild as far as malicious compliance goes, but it is compliance, that's for sure. We have 2 dogs that may or may not try to get out our front door. Most of the time it's just to greet whoever's there. They don't go anywhere. The other dog, if she gets out, she might greet you for 2 seconds and then she's gone. She's a runner. We do have a tracker for her collar, which reminds me, it's charging. I got to put that back on her. And, so we can at least track her. Usually can't get a hold of her unless some stranger is willing to pet her and say hello on the street, and then they can hold her collar. Otherwise, we just kind of got to follow along and hope she wears herself out pretty quickly, and then she'll willingly get in a car after that. Otherwise, when you're riding alongside of her down the street, she's kind of side-eyeing you like it's a game, it's a race. And there's just no way to train that out of her. It's ingrained in her. She was a stray dog for I don't know how long before we got her, and some things you just can't out-train, so there's that. Rude Karen customer says she won't move from the cash till until she gets her way. So years ago, I worked at a 7-Eleven. This happened during graveyard shift. On graveyard shift, there's only one cashier on till, and in my province, prepaying for fuel was about 3 to 4 years was required by law, but a lot of older people refused to prepay for their gas and would demand that they can just leave their card behind. Well, that's a no-go. Considering the pumps were programmed that the pumps won't turn on until there's a payment or pre-authorization, I can't simply turn on the pump. Anyways, at around 4 a.m., it was the store's morning rush, and I had this Karen come in with her drinks and food and wanted me to turn on the pump and wait until her husband was done pumping. I explained how pre-authorization works for fuel, but she was not having none of it. I'm starting to get a lineup of people getting their coffee, food, etc. And I explained again, I can't simply turn on the pump, and pre-authorization is super easy. She doubled down and said she's going to stand here until I turn the pump on so they can gas up and leave. At this time, I'm getting annoyed and said loudly, "So you're not going to prepay for gas and will hold my line up?" She smugly said yes. So I grabbed her already scanned items that I bagged up and put away from her reach and stepped to the other till and started serving the customer behind her and moving the line up to the other till. She was pissed off. After serving 3 or 4 other customers on the next till, she finally gave in and prepaid. I understand why gas stations require, or the card companies require, pre-authorizations and prepay. I don't know how long ago you worked at 7-Eleven, but I mean, pumps have been accepting cards for years. When I was paying cash, I would usually hand off, like if I had a bigger truck, I would hand off $100 and then go pump gas until it was full and then come back and get my change. It's a little bit of a pain, but it is what it is. If I was staying local, I could guesstimate, okay, it's going to take $60 or $70 to fill this tank. And I'd just stay with that. If it still didn't use that much money, then I'd still have to go back in. But, I could usually guesstimate pretty close. As far as cards go, yeah, it kind of sucks. That's why I like paying at the pump if I can. If I go to pay inside with a card, then, I just do the same guesstimates thing. I don't try to fill it. So, kind of got to pick your battles. Company policy is company policy, and you can't change it. Take whatever I bring to the car back? Okay. My sister told me this story about my niece's malicious compliance. First, my sister, Jasmine, is a great mom to Rapunzel, niece's favorite movie. Even when niece was small, she'd clearly tell her expected behavior for situations in clear communication. Rapunzel has always been very intelligent. One of the expected behaviors is that if you bring something to the car, you're expected to remove it. One day when Rapunzel was about 3 or 4, they were going somewhere. Rapunzel says, "Mommy, can you please carry my doll for me?" "Sure, honey." They go wherever they're going, get home, and Jasmine says, "You forgot your doll." "But Mommy, you brought it to the car. I didn't." Jasmine said, "That was the last time I fell for that one." And yes, I did bring it inside because she was right. I did bring it to the car, and that's the rule. Ah, semantics. Gotta love wordplay. Anyway, if I gave my kid a rule like that, I would understand, but at the same time, I would say, well, I carried it for you out as a courtesy. I didn't bring the doll for me. So if you want to keep playing that game, the doll won't come to the car anymore. Might be mean, but it also teaches a lesson. Don't play games with me. You know what I meant. So there's that. Wrong number. So there was this one time that someone texted me by accident. My phone, sometimes I get texts from people who used to have my number. It's annoying sometimes. Not going to get into that part. Anyways, there was this one time someone texted my number asking if it was so-and-so. I told them straight up no. They said to stop playing around with them, that they didn't believe me, and asked so-and-so if they knew about so-and-so 2 and so-and-so 3. I honestly forgot what the texter was asking about, to be honest. It might have been about a birthday or anniversary or something, I don't remember. Anyways, at that point I was getting annoyed, and I wanted this person to leave me alone. He didn't believe that I wasn't so-and-so, and after telling him the first time that I wasn't, so what I did was I just acted like I was so-and-so and basically said along the lines, "Who cares about so-and-so 2 and so-and-so 3? I had used some expletives in that sentence too. At that point, the texter realized his mistake and asked if this was so-and-so, and I told him, "No, you've got the wrong number." At that point, he apologized for his mistake, and I never heard from him again. Yep, if you don't want to listen the first time when I tell you no, then you get what you get. I get that from people with phone calls too. "No, you've got the wrong number," and then eventually I'll play around. Even if they're asking for Shaquanda or Lisa or whoever, and I clearly am not a female, I will still play along and, say whatever comes to my mind. Rewrite the whole essay? In my sophomore year of high school, our English teacher class had to write an essay about a book. Can't remember which book, but it doesn't matter. Well, when our essays were handed back, no one had gotten a good grade on it. The teacher told us that we had to revise our essays based on the corrections we were given and then turn it in again. She wanted 3 copies, the original, the revised one with the corrections we made highlighted, and a final copy without the highlights. I look at mine and compare it to everyone else's essay. Everyone else has the teacher's comments written in red, things underlined, stuff crossed out. Mine just has my grade. It was a D. So I talked to my teacher after class and asked her what I needed to fix since my essay had none of her comments. Her response was that I had to rewrite my essay. Again, I asked what do I need to change to get a better grade. She tells me that it wasn't good and I needed to rewrite the entire essay. Cue my malicious compliance. I rewrote my entire essay, word for word, twice. One for the highlighted copy and one for the final draft. I highlighted random words and sentences on the highlighted copy, but again, it was the same as the one that was given a D. A week later, we get our grades back, and mine had improved to a B. Really? The annoying part was that I couldn't even call her out on it because my school has a plagiarism policy where you can't submit the same assignment twice because that would be cheating. Side note, this teacher also wrote on a different book essay of mine, "Did you even read the book?" when I had gotten yelled at for reading that same book in her class instead of listening to her teach. Sounds like your teacher doesn't have a very good attention span. I don't understand. I mean, she obviously had to notice. I mean, teachers have limited time. I get it. You only have so much time to correct things and read things in depth. But at the same time, I mean, you can clearly tell if something's being rewritten or just copied. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you do with that? Good for you for getting a B, I guess. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's stories. And if you did, do me a favor, click all those little buttons down below to see what they do. And share with friends and family. And go visit the website. You never know. If natural handmade soap isn't your thing, that's cool. And if it is, then enjoy a little browse around and let me know if you have any questions. You can email me down below or at the website address. There's a contact form on there. So, all right, guys. Till the next one, we'll see you.